All right, we got a lot of new things in Master Duel recently. We got a selection pack, actually 2 selection packs, a new ban list, and there's a Duelist Cup around the corner. So let's make a tier list using all of the potentially new decks and new cards that just been unbanned. And I will say now, right now the format, it doesn't feel like there's one perfect deck. I will say, even though Tenpai is still probably going to be the most played deck, every deck feels like it has flaws, right? Like every deck feels like there's at least one match we're gonna run into that feels pretty terrible. So yeah, with that in mind, let's get off with the new cards that everybody's been hyped up about. So Trickstar, yeah, could someone explain to me what the strategy of Trickstar is? Okay, so I figure I know there's something involving Angel of Luthier searching Trickstar reincarnation, which is actually still limited, so I don't know if reincarnation draw is more common now. There's also like this deck is anti-maxi in the sense that if you maxi this and if you're playing Dark Door, I guess you just deck out, you just lose, you just get burned for infinity. And yeah, minus 200. Other than that, I haven't this is like the one deck I've seen nobody actually play since the came out realistically. And also it's funny because there is one Trickstar card, but that the deck that I've seen use Trickstar cards the most is actually not Trickstar, it's Marincess. And yeah, if you're wondering what card I'm talking about Trickstar Aqua Angel. I made a video on this. Basically, they gave Marincess a Trickstar Aqua Angel is basically a Marincess card. Like it's not basically, it literally is a Marincess card, and it gives perfect information. When it's linked off, you get to see your opponent's entire hand, and it arrives itself if you have a Marincess monster on the field. So it's an extender. It gives hand information, and it's another starter for a deck. And yeah, this might be coping a little bit because I'm putting this in Rogue, but I will say that the deck has been, like, literally, it's for a year, it feels like this deck has been completely irrelevant, and like, I've been literally only using this as an events deck, as a budget option in events where links are allowed. But, now I'll say that this deck might be able to compete in a non-event ban list, right? In like an actual format. It's not crazy or anything, okay? But at the end of the day, it's a deck that can run 17, 18 plus hand traps. So it can't be too bad. It has a bunch of one-card combos. It plays through every hand trap fine except for Maxi, but that's nothing new for a lot of decks. And yeah, basically the Trickstar support helped Marincess more than it helped Trickstar. Who'd have thought, right? And next we have White Forest. So I will say I'm not the most experienced White Forest duelist. One, they're super expensive, so I don't have all the cards, but also it feels like this deck, I'm not sure what's the best way to play this. It feels like every variant, there's lots of ways you can play White Forest, lots of variants, and all of them feel like there's at least like some glaring flaw with them, at least until we get the Azamina cards, which we don't have yet. But yeah, speaking of the variants, one of them is let's see if I can find it. Runic Whitewoods, or Runic White Forest. Problem with the Runic variant is that you're playing Runic cards. So you all know the state of Runic cards in Master Duel, right? I don't have to spend too much time on how gimped this engine is. One fountain, hella limits on all the good quick play spells. Even if you resolve fountain, there's no guarantee you're gonna actually draw good disruption off the quick plays, or good quick plays to disrupt your opponent with. 1 SP gets rid of your fountain, gets rid of your entire game plan, and you have no room for non-engine in a meta with a bunch of like degenerate going first decks, and literally even an FTK deck now. So yeah, that's why I'm not sure Runic White Forest is necessarily the best way to play White Forest, but at the same time, like what are the other ways, right? There's White Forest Centurion, which might be the can you play a pure White Forest deck? Are there enough cards to play a pure White Forest deck? I'm not sure, but Centurion White Forest, I suppose it's okay. I'm not sure if it necessarily if that's better than playing actual pure Centurion or not. Maybe having the extenders with White Forest gives it an edge over pure Centurion. And then I've seen people play Toy Box with this, which is like when you're playing Toy Box Centurion White Forest, you have basically as much non-engine space as you put in a Runic deck, which is like none at all. But yeah, it's like it doesn't put up the most oppressive board or anything. It's okay. It plays through. It feels weird. Sometimes it plays through hand traps. Sometimes because you have to discard for every summon if you get hit by like a hand trap and you don't have that many extenders. Like it just feels really bad. But I'll say it's okay on the premise that there's probably a way to build this in Master Duel. But it's just right now I haven't really been impressed with the several different builds of this. Next is a Gimmick Puppet. So FTK Go. This might be controversial, but I think Gimmick Puppet is low-key maybe one of the best out of the new decks introduced in the selection pack. It's because have you read the cards? They gave an FTK deck a circular, and they gave it a Sangan summoning, where their field spell basically turns off every single hand trap in the game, except what's it called, Imperm, because it's not a monster. But then it can turn off Imperm too, because they can send stuff that makes your Gimmick Puppets unrespondable and untargetable. It's like, bro, sometimes it feels like the only actual way to feel the only hand trap that reliably stops the FTK is like Droll and like Graveyard Disruption, like Bestials or DD Crow, which those tend to be the less common hand traps, compared to the classics, Ash, Valor, Imperm, Maxi. Those are risky because sometimes the game player will just open a hand where literally none of those hand traps do absolutely anything to you, and then you just get FTK'd. And it's the best of one, and Tenpai is still in the format. So yeah, Tenpai makes you go first, and you open Field Spell, and you're like, oh, thank you very much. Okay, on to go next, sir. So yeah, I will say, I'm not gonna put a tier 2 or anything. There's some ways like going second. It has decent room for non-engine as well. It's just you can't play anything but non-Gimmick Puppets, so it's like you don't have very much versatility from your extra deck. It's you definitely have to worry about this. Okay, you definitely do not ignore Gimmick Puppet, otherwise you're just gonna get FTK left and right. And next we have Illusion. So Illusion got the Diabell's thing, the anti-spell on legs. That's another reason why you don't want to play a Runic, because it turns off all quickly spells. So damn. But yeah, Chimera now is, I would say it's pretty decent now. It adds consistency now because of the Nightmare Apprentice from the last selection pack. And the Diabellus is nice. I don't think the Diabellus adds too much to the deck, because at the end of the day, it's just a one-off that you're gonna summon at the end of your combo. And honestly, as most people I've just seen have just swapped out the Dark Barrier statue for that, so it maybe increases the Circilian bit. It's a bit more, it increases resilience because it's an illusion monster. Now you can summon it more in more of your setups, like with Master Duel, where you wouldn't be able to if that was a barrier statue in hand instead. But yeah, it's a nice solid deck. It's not super overpowered or anything. It doesn't put up the most oppressive board or anything. It can play through hand traps decently well, and I like that it doesn't care about Maxi as much as other decks. So yeah, it's just solid. It's definitely improved from last format before it got Diabells. And anything else I'm missing on this? Yeah, I don't know if I still don't know if you should play this with other engines. Probably not Runic at this point. Again, I hate to keep bringing that up, but I've seen people still playing Branded, because there's Branded got some extra consistency back. I suppose you got a extra copy of Branded opening, and obviously Branded Fusion Mean at 1 still sucks, so there's still some bricks involved in that build. But yeah, Illusion's solid deck. So now, this next section with all of these unmanned cards from the balance, this is where I'm gonna upset a bunch of Yugi millennials, aka NBT. Since maybe not for Dragoon. I think Dragoon is honestly not that that great. Like the most of the decks that are gonna play Dragoon are the decks that are in this tier, like low roguish. Okay, like none of you're gonna see like all the tier 1 decks and tier 2 decks. None of them are gonna want to play Dragoon because they're not gonna want to put 3 bricks in your deck just to afford this. Okay, like they're decks I'm talking about, like Dark Magician. Oh yeah, go ahead, play Dragoon. Shining Sarcophagus, we'll get to that later. Yeah, go ahead, play Dragoon. I guess the most high tier deck I've seen people experiment Dragoon with is White Forest, because you could, with decks that make level 6 synchros, you can go Mud Dragon into Albion into Dragoon, which means you can play Dragoon without playing any main deck bricks, so that's probably more worth it, although it takes 3 extra deck slots, but I guess if you have room for the 3 extra deck slots, it's better than running 3 bricks in the main deck, so it's alright. But for the most part, like, yeah, most of the higher tier decks should not actually touch this, in my opinion. Also, there's an argument to where if this is actually better than the other Plan B card that came out, the other Link 2 that came out this selection pack, which is Scylla Hat Rabbit, because Scylla Hat Rabbit is like the competition to Verte. They're both made with they're both generic Link 2s that you can make with any 2 bodies, and they also tend to be strong Plan Bs, where if you get stopped by, like, say, a few hand traps, you can go into them, you can go into Verte, or you can go into Scylla Hat Rabbit, and then end on a disruption. The thing is, I like Scylla Hat Rabbit better, because Scylla Hat Rabbit runs 1 soft brick in, like, a statue of Azure Rune, and that's it, versus the 3 bricks that Dragoon plays. One of them basically being a Garnet, because if you draw the Red Eyes Fusion, you can't even, like, you can't send it from the deck with Verte. So, like, the only way you're gonna use it at that point is if you hard use it, and then you can't normal summon for the rest of the turn. It's like not, I don't like the brick ratio that Dragoon provides. Whereas Scylla Hat Rabbit, it's just 1 deck slot versus 3 with the Dragoon package. If you draw the Azure Rune statue, it's fine. You can still use it, and you can still use it as an effect. So that seems like a better, more like a better package, a better Link 2, generic Link 2 to go into over Verte. But yeah, maybe if some high tier deck uses Dragoon, like, I don't know, Branded. I don't even think Branded really needs to go into Dragoon, like adding a brick to make it, or like playing cards like Shadow's Light or Duality, which they're not bricks, but at the same time they're not like starters or anything. You kind of have to be playing, kind of have to be able to make a Cartasia in the or Grand Guignol in the first place in order to turn those into Dragoon. So yeah, this deck, I'm not sure there's like a real home for this. Yeah, but we'll see. Speaking of Nightmare Mermaid, okay, so like here's the thing. Full Orcust combo is like cool and all. I've seen people experiment with playing this in like Snake Eyes or like decks that have room for this. The thing is, it's like you're putting like a similar number of bricks in your deck as you would with Dragoon, right? Like, think about it. You're putting like at least 2 Orcust monsters, 1 Nightmare, and then like a Heartpourer most likely, and then the card you want to set off Galatea being a Babel or a Crescendo. That's at minimum 3 bricks added. Generally, I've seen people are running more higher Orcust counts, so they're running anywhere up to like 5 bricks or something. Which you're doing all of that to get what, an Omni Negate on your end board, or like an extra send off ding for the Babel. Like, I don't know. This is like, yeah, I've still yet to see a deck that I've been really impressed with run Nightmare Mermaid. And I guess to continue on that point, Orcust, like straight up Orcust. So I'm not even sure how much Nightmare Mermaid actually helps Orcust, because the main point of Mermaid is that it turns any 2 monsters into full Orcust combo, right? But when you're playing an Orcust deck, most of the time any 2 monsters was already Orcust combo, because one of your monsters was going to be an Orcust monster, and you could just go into Galatea, right? Am I missing something? I suppose you need to shovel something back for it, so it's not always. So I guess having a Mermaid adds a little bit more consistency, and you could run generic extenders instead of having to run more Orcust monsters, I suppose. But yeah, people have been asking me like about like Orcust. I don't think the Orcust. First of all, the end board is really nothing to. It's nothing to be afraid of, especially without the new support. You're only ending on likely 1, maybe 2 in-engine disruptions as your end board. is really like the fact that you can run other non-engine with this too. And please don't cope on Striker Orcus right now. I swear that deck is not good, not good by 2024 standards. You can go ahead and try. You could probably get all the gems from Duelist Cup with it, but I wouldn't recommend grinding that in stage 2 or anything. And if you are like a Giga Chat trying to get top 100 with a fucking Orcus deck with Nightmare Mermaid, I mean, God bless you. You're probably the best duelist in the entire world if you can do that. And Nightmare Goblin. So Nightmare Goblin, this is the thing that has potential to be the most problematic, we'll say, out of all the unbanned cards. Just because it's only ever been used in degenerate strategies, and I know MBTV at this point, it's like the best case scenario is that Nightmare Goblin does nothing, but if it's used for something, it's going to be used in the most degenerate, dumbass combo ever, which is true. At the same time, Master Duel has a ton of degenerate, dumbass FTK combos or pseudo FTK combos already, and not a lot of them are really high tier at all. And all of them, I would say, are better than the ones that use Nightmare Goblin, because at the end of the day, it's like a second normal summon right now in 2024, not really the most important resource in Yu-Gi-Oh! We have Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes, first of all, a Snake Eyes that can go full combo with 0 normal summons. Okay, you open Witch, that's full Snake Eyes combo without a normal summon. So why would you need an extra 2 normal summons to do that, right? I mean, it's yeah. Again, I've seen some builds with this. They've been, I don't know. They've been seem kind of bricky because you're running a bunch more normal summons in your deck, which makes you open to disruption. But I'm open to being wrong about Goblin, because there might be some degenerate stuff I'm missing. Like, unlike Mermaid and Dragoon, which I don't really see ever being that problematic, there's a chance that Nightmare Goblin, there's something that we're missing, and it might actually be a problem later. As of right now, I'm not seeing it, but maybe in a month time, I'll change my mind on this. Masterpiece. Okay, so low key, True Draco might be the most problematic thing out of the unbanned list. Not to say it's problematic or anything. It's just that there's an actual strategy involved around this, where you're playing a deck full of floodgates, and it's a stun deck, and like True Draco is at, I wouldn't say it's at full power because you have 3 diagram, but all the good draw spells are actually bunked. You have 1 Desire, you have 1 Pod Duality, no card demise. Like your actual draw power, which is like arguably the thing that makes the deck the most scary, is actually pretty hit. But yeah, that's just Masterpiece. Masterpiece itself is not a problem for anyone. Okay, like literally every deck can summon 3k attack monsters. Okay, that's not the issue. The only issue is if this deck sees an uptick in play, and then you're gonna see a bunch more True Draco floodgates. But yeah, at the same time, that's not really. If True Draco Floodgate was good before, it would have saw it played. Not Masterpiece is not going to be the reason why. If anything, Diagram is the bigger deal between Masterpiece and Diagram, between the 2 unbans, because that actually gives the deck some consistency. It's not just adding a boss monster that's by 2024 standards pretty easily outed these days. Like this actually, yeah. Ever seen a Dragoon versus a Masterpiece? Yeah. Yeah, speaking of an Ib. Okay, so Ib. This engine takes way too much. You're not gonna. I really do not recommend playing Ib decks based around Ib. Okay, unless you're playing pure World Chalice. But in that case, you're playing pure World Chalice. So you're making some concessions there. Yeah, the fact that you need to add the World Legacy Revive card like as a search target, then probably another semi-brick to summon off the Ib, and then it's the fact that it's a level 5 tuner. Like, not a lot of decks make level 5s synchros as of right now. They have to like go out of their way to like incorporate making a level 5 synchro in their lines. It feels kind of awkward, and it's like not worth the bricks. Every deck right now can do a combo that's good enough without having to go through this, right? And it's not like Dragoon or Mermaid, where it's a backup plan where if you get hand trapped, at least you can turn 2 monsters and go into something. Whereas if you get hand trapped, you're not going to be able to go into Ib in the first place. So I'll put this down here. They know what they were doing making it an SR. Nobody cares about this one, I suppose. And yeah, more new decks. Labyrinth. You might be thinking, what card did Labyrinth get? Okay, Labyrinth got this card called Simultaneous Equation Cannon. Basically, it banishes your opponent's entire field, searchable off trap tricks. That's pretty crazy. Okay, now the only thing that's possibly holding that back is that I'm not sure Trap Labyrinth is the best way to play Labyrinth, because realistically, you're probably only playing Simultaneous Equation Cannons in Trap Labyrinth, and actually we saw a Labyrinth deck got top 10 in rating duels last format, but that was Furniture Lab, and I don't think Furniture Lab is going to really be playing a build relying on Simultaneous Equation Cannon, so that really only helps out half the Labyrinth builds, so I don't think it boosts us up to like a tier or anything, or boosts up Labyrinth a whole tier or anything, but it definitely is a buff. Now, Tenpai is never winning. Tenpai is never winning against Labyrinth. And now, if they make them go first, because they're gonna set, set 5 is already hard to beat, but now you have the best normal trap in the game. So, yeah, we'll see. I think this deck has some potential. It's just going second. It's still it can be rough, but Simultaneous Equation Cannon, as long as you resolve that, even if you go second and you can bait out some negates, it's okay. Now, admittedly, it's a bit awkward because there's a bunch of decks that do end on a bunch of negates, like that we'll get to later, but also there's another FTK deck in the format, which is like, playing a deck with 30 traps is not really conducive to having a winning matchup versus an FTK deck, but it's solid. I could see Labyrinth being argued for being tier 2, but I'll keep it near the top of tier 3 right now. And now let's get into some of last format's top tier. So Tenpai, as I said again, every deck feels flawed. Tenpai is no exception. Even though it's the most played deck and arguably it's the strongest deck, it's not a perfect deck. A lot of people are not going to consider Tenpai for stage 2 just because it just has so many bad matchups, like Labyrinth or decks that, or like the pseudo FTK decks or the real FTK decks that you don't want to play in like a 72-hour grind period. Or if you're playing the mirror match, it's never a fun time. Yeah, it's still, even after the panelists, it's like Lightning Storm to 2. Oh no, only 1% of Tenpai decks play more than 2 Lightning Storm. What are they ever gonna do? Prosperity is definitely a real hit though, so at least that was something. And Gamma going from 2 to 1 is also a real hit because Tenpai was one of the decks that played Gamma. But yeah, it's Tenpai. You should know what this deck does by now, right? I think most people generally have an idea of this. I don't think it got it hasn't gotten better. I would say it's gotten slightly worse every format since it's been out. That's because people have been learning to play against this better, and people have been more greedy in their deck building and playing more going first cards. We'll see if people are still going to do that this format, or if Tenpai falls off in terms of little of play rate, then people will stop main decking so many floodgates and solemn judgments. But I mean, probably not. And Yubel, so Yubel, probably the second best deck. I'd say probably. This isn't Defend or anything. You could even make an argument that something that's not Tenpai is the best deck. Very easily, to be honest. I'm just going to put Tenpai up here just because it's definitely going to be by far the most played. Yubel has a decent Tenpai matchup, but although it has this problem of it loses to double board breaker, which is really weird. You can play Scythe to play around the double board breaker versus Tenpai, but not every Yubel build is playing Scythe. So the matchup versus Tenpai is like extremely just draw the out, like who draws the better hand, right? Because the full Yubel board combo is like an FTK against most decks, but the decks that you can play into the board are decks like Tenpai that play multiple board breakers, or decks like Labyrinth, which don't rely on monster negates. I'm talking about the Trap Labyrinth, by the way, with Simultaneous Equation Cannon. So even then, even if you go full board, full combo, and your opponent has no hand traps, sometimes it doesn't feel safe with Yubel, which was definitely for the past like 2 or 3 months. It felt like if Yubel resolved their combo, they were just gonna win. But I guess if you play Scythe, that's still the case. Yeah, I'll still keep it in tier 1. I don't think anyone's gonna argue that it's not one of the best decks. I think I might get some arguments about this Fire King Snake Eyes. I think personally, I think it's still up here. It's one of the best decks, but it just it's seeing so little play compared to the other decks. Although I suppose now I've been seeing it a bit more often now. It's seen a bit of more play recently on ladder end tournaments. The main thing is that I think this is one of the best decks against Tenpai. Makes an end board that's basically unboard breakable, because you're often going to have an Appaloosa made of IP. You're going to have a Fire King Island with Sanctuary up, so Lightning Storm can't blow up the Fire King Island. You're going to have, obviously, if you try to Dark Hole or Raigeki any other monster on the board, like try Raigeki a Fire King board, see what happens. And then you have a Princess in the grave, and then the Karuna comes back. Also comes back from the grave, so it's hard to droplet everything. And there's like an IP coming back from the grave as well, so like droplet is like very weird timing as well. And even if you get max seed against Tenpai, because you're playing level 1s, you make this card called Fucho, or as I'm sure Tenpai players would call it, Fucko, because it absolutely destroys the Tenpai matchup. Even if they do max seed, it's like, well, good luck. I hope you're playing a Kaiju, or I hope you're playing Santa Claus, otherwise you're not going to kill me. And then I get another Furnace for the Fire King deck. So yeah, this deck has definitely a lot of positives, and also these are a couple decks I can run a decent amount of non-engine, and especially Fire King. Fire King has still one of the best engines at playing through boards, even though you probably still need at least one hand trap to be able to, you know, play into most boards. This deck has a better chance than most. And on that note, okay, Ritual Beast. Okay, so Ritual Beast, don't know if I want to put it as tier 1 or tier 2. I just by the stats, Ritual Beast should still be tier 1, because it still has a super high win rate despite everything. And obviously it has a very good Tenpai matchup, because if you make Tenpai makes this deck go first, this deck makes a very good end board, and it's also very good at playing through hand traps, obviously, because the no-chi, the non-targeting stuff, and stuff like that. But I don't think people are Imperme Elder anymore, thank God, at least that's the case. Yeah, the main problem with Ritual Beast is that we're not playing against Tenpai. It just feels like going second, this deck feels, it's a struggle. This is a deck that, compared to, like, you know, these two decks up here, Yubel and Fire King, it doesn't have as much room for non-engine, or as much room for hand traps. Also, one of the best things that helped Ritual Beast go second was Shifter, because it was like a turn skip against every other deck, pretty much, and you didn't need to open multiple hand traps if you opened a Shifter. But now that Shifter got hit to 1, you're rarely ever gonna actually see Shifter going second as Ritual Beast, and that just makes when your opponent actually flips up their full board and you have to play into it, which happens a lot because you're not running as many hand traps as other decks, it's kind of an issue. Also, this deck did play Prosperity. Admittedly, Prosperity was not as important to this deck as it was for other decks, as you would only Prosperity advantage for 3, but it's just like a slight consistency hit. So I'd say this deck overall, it did get hurt by Vanillist much more than, say, these at least Fire King and Snake and Yubel. Well, I mean, they didn't get hit by Vanillist at all, and arguably it got hit as hard as Tenpai, because Tenpai didn't rely on Shifter as much as Ritual Beast did going second. I'll still keep it up here. Another deck got hit by the bans. Okay, so Voiceless Voice. I know I put Voiceless Voice tier 1. I do think that Voiceless Voice is probably the worst out of, even when I put it at tier 1, Voiceless Voice is probably the worst of these 5 tier 1 decks. But the ban list hurts, man. Like, Prosperity, yes, Voiceless Voice ran Prosperity. It was one of those, so it does lose a bit of consistency there. But the main thing is, hitting Gamma, it actually hurts Voiceless Voice so bad, because honestly, one of the reasons Voiceless Voice was so good at going first was because it baited Gamma like crazy. It was impossible to hand trap Voiceless Voice without playing the Gamma, and anytime you play in the Gamma, you just auto lose. So there was that dynamic. Like, what, are you just gonna let me resolve pre-prep, go for a +1? Are you gonna let me resolve Saphira for a +1? Are you gonna let me Diviner get full combo? Like, are you gonna let me resolve Nadir? Like, so many ways this deck baits out Gamma. Also, most people, they're gonna chain Maxi the first instance, because if you don't chain Maxi on like this ritual summon, you're only gonna draw 1 card. Your Maxi is an Upstart Goblin at most. So yeah, and people would just get blown out by Gamma. But now it's definitely not worth running the 1 Gamma, in my opinion, in Voiceless Voice. And we didn't, I thought we might get Dominus Purge to make up for that, but we didn't. So yeah, this actually, I'd still say it's okay. It still has a very good 10 by matchup even without Gamma. It's just against everything else, it would be nice to have. And also going second, obviously, is still sort of an issue, especially if you're not running Gamma now, because Gamma was also one of the best, hand traps going second. But now if you replace it with something else, it makes like going second harder. So I'm gonna keep it here for now. Still did do okay in the rating duel, so I won't drop it too far. And honestly, you could make an argument it should still be up here, but yeah, I'll keep this here for now. Okay, Shining Star. I should have talked about those with the Dragoon. Okay, so Shining Sarkis, I think it was the deck that got helped by most by Dragoon. Okay, don't get me wrong, I still don't think it's that great or anything, but at the very least, it's a deck that I don't know. It's a rogue. No, that's too much for it. It still has so many problems. Like the combo to get Dragoon still loses to every hand trap, but at least its end board is something now. You have an Omni Negate on your end board. You have like multiple negates on your end board. Chances are, if you resolve Gandora and banishing Dark Magician, and then you get on your set, you get Dragoon Spell Negate plus Shining Sark plus another target negate, you actually you're actually probably favored to win that game. Which, yeah, before I don't even think you were favored to win the game if you resolved your comp. But yeah, Shining Star, it has room for lots of hand traps, although that's mainly because so many of the Shining Star monsters are so bad that you don't want to play them, so that's why you have room, because you don't want to play the other bad cards. But yeah, lots of hand traps. It takes advantage of Dragoon, probably the best out of a lot, because you don't, again, I showed the video, you don't need to run bricks to play Dragoon. You can just make it. This Dark Magician searches the quick play spell to just fuse Dragoon on your opponent's turn, so yeah, it's alright. Flame Swordsman. Okay, so here's the thing. I know a Flame Swordsman deck technically got top 10 in the rated last season, but oh, come on, guys. That was entirely an Isoda tech. Okay, that was the entire point. I'm not sure how much the Flame Swordsman cards add, but I'm sure 90% of the reason that the deck was good was because you could resolve this card. Okay, Isoda, which is still legal, which is why. Yeah, it's. I've been told that it's not even optimal to play the Flame Swordsman cards with Isoda decks. I don't know how true that is, because again, the last deck that got top 10 did play some Flame Swordsman cards, but you're not playing. It's not really a Flame Swordsman deck. You're not doing the strategy where you're trying to attack your opponents per game. You're playing a bunch of Flame Swordsman trap cards, so like sitting on back or playing it like Peeps. Okay, you're just turning out Isoda, and there just happens to be Flame Swordsman cards. If you're not playing this card in your Flame Swordsman deck, then it's down here. Okay, like I'm sorry Peeps. Like I'm sorry, your deck is not is not rogue level yet. Yeah, and then Branded. Okay, so let's talk about some tier 2 decks. Branded. I'm not sure about Branded because it's another deck that has been seeing just less play. It did also get top 10 last rating format, so it's can't be that bad. It's gotten consistency back over the last few ban lists, like 2 Gold Star, 2 Brand Opening is nice. It can make use of Dragoon, although I don't know really how good that is, or like if it's even worth playing Dragoon in here. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But like if you're gonna run a brick, I would always prioritize running a brick that floodgates your opponent first with Sanctifier, and then focus on Dragoon. But if there's a line where you can go like go into Grand Granule, Duality, send the Grand Granule, make a Dragoon, and then have your Mana Fusion protect the Dragoon, that's pretty decent. Although I worry about the amount of discards you need, because you need to discard for Dragoon's negate as well. And obviously Brandon is a deck that already discards a lot during its combo between opening, High Spirits, and Lubellion, but it's okay. It's okay. I will say the thing about these kinds of decks that rely more on board breakers than hand traps and have tons of engine is that it's getting harder and harder to go second that way, just because there's so many decks out here that you just need, you want a hand trap, you try to board breaker them, they still have so much resources where their end board is too oppressive, or they're gimmick puppet and they actually FTK you, in which case your board breakers don't do jack. But I mean, hopefully there are too many FTK decks besides gimmick puppet. Yeah, I'll keep it in tier 2 for now. Kashtira, boy, Kashtira, man, talk about the low-key Kashtira got hit by the ban list the absolute hardest out of everyone. because Kashira, it lost Pride Prosperity, so it was a deck that already had that was already low on starters, and it just lost another one. Gamma was actually very important because Gamma, not only was this deck good at baiting out Gamma, and that was one of the perks of playing Kashira, which was that if you go Pathfinder or you go Small World, search a Unicorn, search a Kashira monster, they were most likely going to max you because they want to get the most value out of max C. There's also the they also would just ash straight up your Pathfinder or your field spell, which I'm not even sure how many Kashira players were playing those cards anymore just because of that. But yeah, Gamma was good in that sense against Ash and Maxi in Kashira. Also, Gamma was a very important small world bridge, and I don't think it's worth running Gamma at 1 with 1 driver, but you're gonna have to run a brick if you're running small world anyways, because just to bridge all your Kashira monsters. I don't know how to even build this deck anymore. Like straight up, if you run 3 small world, 3 Pathfinder, you still only have like 9 1-card starters in your entire deck. That's like so trash. Like, did you even play this like a floodgate deck? There's like better floodgate decks. Like okay, maybe not runic floodgates, but yeah. On the subject of runic, I'll say this is very funny, but I think even runic stun is not very good. I think the best way to play stun is not runic stun, right? like the best way to play stun is just playing a straight up stun with like your 1 limited Fossilida and a bunch of like Earth Barrier statues or whatever. Like playing a runic stun with Light Barrier statues when Voice is a deck. Like imagine you go runic, you're playing a runic stun and you go summon Barrier statue, the Light Barrier statue. And your opponent goes, all right, bet. Activate Saphira, activate pre-preps, ritual summon Skull Guardian. Okay, nice stun deck. Definitely stop me from playing a lot, but yeah, even if you're playing stun, don't play runic stun. It's there's too many hits to this engine, and oh yeah, so one of the decks that people have been talking about playing Ib in is Dragon Link, because one of the World Chalice monsters is a dragon. I will say I looked into it. I don't think Dragon Link with Ib is even that great, because you have to bloat out your deck with like some weird engines. Like either you're playing Adventure Red Rose, which has the issue of what are you going to play as non-engine? You have no room for non-engine already, and you're playing a 60-card deck just because that engine takes up so much space. There's also Wanted Die Bellstar for OSS to summon Flambout Guard to make Ib, which definitely does not feel worth it because you also need the level 4 monster to pair it with. So what are you playing? You're playing Dragon Link with Wanted Die Bellstar original symbol spoilers plus Adventure Engine plus Red Rose plus L plus Ratio. How is that deck gonna work? I don't really quite understand. Like, I'm having trouble fitting it in the 60-card deck already. Like, we can't play 69-card decks out here. But yeah, other than that, let's assume you're not playing Ib, because I don't think Ib is really the best way to play Dragon Link. There's just it's just can't justify the bricks. But yeah, Bestials, they've gotten weird. I wouldn't say they've gotten that much worse than they were before. In fact, they've probably gotten better with the introduction of Gimmick Puppet, and I guess Illusion being a bit more popular. There's like more use there, and like against Whitewoods, there's some application against Whitewoods as well. Actually, yeah, now I think about it, maybe Bestials have gotten slightly better. And this deck, its playability heavily depends on how good Bestials are, just because this deck is the deck that runs most Bestials again. So when Bestials are good, Dragon Link gets a lot better. So I suppose it's alright. Its end board is also pretty good against Tenpai. It's pretty much droplet or bust. Like, Tenpai can't beat actually out of Borderland unless they draw the droplets, so it's okay. And then, seals, between your seals and your Bestials, and like your Baldric, if you play that, and regain, and then other stuff, it's definitely hard for Tenpai to kill you through your typical Dragon Link board. And yeah, it's alright. It's just, maxi problem, Bestials being decent, but not the greatest, especially against these top decks. That's why it's still I would still put it down here. It's better. Bichos are like better against the lower tier decks on like the tier 2 or especially tier 3 and lower decks, but they're generally not that great against the tier 1 decks. Melodious. So pure Melodious. Okay, there's a lot of Melodious variants we should talk about. I'll put them all together here. So we have these Melodious variants. The main thing is I'm ranking pure Melodious. I think pure Melodious is honestly the worst out of all Melodious variants. Not gonna lie, this deck is just too vulnerable to hand traps and too vulnerable to non-engine because it gets hit by every relevant non-engine. You know, Ash on Ostinato, Valor on Baka, Baja, Ogre on the Pendulum Scales, like Bell on the Baja Grave Effect. There's like so many at every point you're gonna get hit by a high impact hand trap. So, and I've not been impressed with pure Melodious. It's just like I'll put it at the bottom of tier 3, I suppose. It's just, yeah, I've rarely ever seen pure Melodious pop off. It's the only, it has room for lots of hand traps. At least it has that going for it. But all the Melodious variants have some decent room for hand traps for the most part. So this is like, yeah, I'll put it here. Snake Eyes. So people have been experimenting with Snake Eyes Melodious, and it's definitely probably the best way to play Snake Eyes, just because I want to say the best way to play pure Snake Eyes, but it's not really pure Snake Eyes if you're just playing with the Melodious engine, because the Melodious engine gives you more starters than the Snake Eyes engine does these days, but you're using it to make a Snake Eyes end board. Some people have been using Trigate. There's been some number 38 Hope Harbinger stuff. But yeah, basically you still have Flamebird, you still have IP, you still have Appaloosa, so that's a decent enough end board off one card. And yeah, I think it's better than pure Melodious, because you have a bit more starters in the, like your Snake Eyes engine, your Bonfires, your Wanteds, and makes a better end board. It's just I don't know about the Snake. It hasn't done too much. It's hasn't seen too much tournament success, I don't think. But yeah, Snake Eyes, Melodious, we'll put here for now. And the other Melodious variants, so Supreme King and the Draco Slayer. These are the variants of that Splash Melodious that I think gain the most from the just splashing the Melodious engine, because these are just Pendulum decks. So obviously Pendulum decks are going to take bigger advantage out of the splashing the Melodious engine that provides you Pendulum Scales than say a non-Pendulum deck would. And Draco Slayer, this deck's been seeing a lot of hype in Japan, and it got top 10 and rated as well, it seems. So yeah, I think it's better than the Supreme King version. I think these still have issues in that, again, they're kind of hard to play going second. I don't quite know. Maybe they just gave up on going second. Maybe they played against a lot of Tenpai. But yeah, Supreme King actually has a decent amount of room for non-engine. The Draco Slayer version, it searches Secret Village. You guys all know what that card does. And these decks are actually, at least compared to Snake Eyes, these are a lot harder to hand trap, just because they have much more extenders, and it's not like Snake Eyes is like depending on the Melodious package as a starter. More these decks, they're Pendulum decks. When they go first, it's like a massive problem to try to hand trap them. So yeah, and also another thing about the Draco Slayer deck is that I saw it run the Super Heavy Samurai cards. So Super Heavy Samurai is another deck that's, well, it's not really a deck. Okay, like if you were playing pure Super Heavy Samurai, it would probably be down here just because there's not enough stars. But it's been played in a couple of just top 10 rated decks. Like it's been played in Magic Spec. It's been played in a not Magic. I guess this is Draco Slayer plus Magic Spectre, and it's been also played in where it's been played in the Flame Swordsman Isoda deck for some reason. It basically, it's because Wakaushi still exists, and Wakaushi and the Super Heavy Samurai Scarecrow, they're both cards that exist, and because they will exist, they will just enable the most degenerate combos. But I think you have to play them in conjunction with other decks now. I don't think pure Super Heavy Samurai is like really an actual real deck from now on. It's just in a bunch of hybrids. Math deck, we all know what Math deck does by now. Runs lots of hand traps. Circular is legal at 3 copies, and Terahertz is very good against Tenpai. So that's why it sees a lot of play, and it's always you know, if you're playing against a lot of Tenpai, this Math deck is obviously very good against them. And against other decks, this deck runs more hand traps than most decks, so it has that going for it. I will say there's a few matchups, you know, like the back row matchups are really bad for Math mech. So if Lab gets more popular because of simultaneous equation cannon, then that's might be a bit more of an issue. Other than that, though, there haven't really been a lot of meta back row decks recently, and like Stun has just overall been getting worse, or like at least has not been really getting better, even if it's, I guess it's getting more I don't know if Stun's getting more popular or less popular. Sometimes like I can go like weeks without playing against Stun, and then I'll just play against Stun like 3 games in a row. I don't know what's quite going on in Stun players' minds, but yeah, against normal decks, Math mech with just a bunch of hand traps will probably just suffice. And so Lightsworn. This is we can talk about Lightsworn tier and like all the tier variants together. So pure 40 card tier deck. I think it's been seeing less play recently. Like people have been playing anything but a 40 card tier list. Even though I still think the 40 card tier list is still like the best, just because it plays the least amount of bricks. I guess like it still works for the most part. It's like it's like Brandon. It's like old reliable. You know, Kickalos is legal. You resolve Kickalos, you win the game most likely. And you have because your disruptions are like all in your, like you have a bunch of disruptions just from your graveyard between Snow and the Shufflers. It's hard for Tenpai to kill past your board. I will say, you know, Snow went to 1. Snow going to 1 does not hurt the 40 card tier list at all, because they only played 1. What the Snow hit limit does do is it hurts every other variant of tier. Every variant that goes over 40 cards that are playing multiple copies of Snow to try and mill it, yeah, those are specifically the Lightsworn version, okay? The Lightsworn FTK, they always play multiple Snow, because you have to get Snow. It's imperative to get the Snow, because you need Snow to banish your cards for your Arrow Shark FTK. But if you can't get the Snow, it becomes so much harder, because then you have to make like random curious lines in order to dump Snow, and that makes you much more vulnerable to getting hand trapped. Because if you just don't mill Snow, but then you go Hail Mary into curious, and then they like, I don't know, they like ash it or they Valor it, well then you can't FTK them. So like it's rough. Like people have been saying that the Lightsworn FTK is better than the Gimmick Puppet FTK. I don't know. I feel like an FTK that gives you circular plus a bunch of blanket protection against hand traps seems better than a FTK that relies on milling a card that's now limited. But yeah, you know, maybe people will prove me wrong. Maybe people will get another. There will be a couple more Lightsworn FTKs in the top 100 in Duelist Cup, and then, you know, that would be a good thing, because that means they're gonna ban Arrow Shark. Which that card, I don't know why the hell Arrow Shark is still legal. Who cares about Arrow Shark? Okay, nobody will be like, nobody is gonna cry about Arrow Shark getting banned. I don't know, but yeah, the other version of here, the 60 card terrorist build. So honestly, this is like the most war crime deck I've ever seen. It's every time I look at a deck list, it gets worse. You know, it was bad enough when they added in Sangan Summoning to add Genroku. Now I see Black Garden as anti-max C tools to deck people out instead of Necroface, because Necroface relied on Snow, and obviously you can't rely on Snow anymore because it got limited. So yeah, I would not be surprised if there's a, you know, U-Bell is not unheard of in these decks. The U-Bell engine to make Phantom to play around hand traps. I would not be surprised if there's a fucking Nightmare Goblin and a Nightmare Mermaid somewhere in there with a bunch of Orcus cards in these tier piles too. It's like, when you go second against these 60 card tier piles, you're in for the most degenerate gameplay imaginable, because you're just gonna try to gas through all your hand traps. If you try to maxi them, they're gonna deck you out. Like, it's, and like regular hand traps don't do anything. They're gonna Gen and Ken you. You're gonna They're gonna make you force their talent slash to look at your hand to like rip cards out of your. It's so degenerate. At the same time, I don't think it's that great because going second, this deck plays so many bricks, and it's not rare where that you're gonna find yourself playing with a 4, or even a 3-card hand, just because you have 3 bricks in your hand. And when you're going second and playing to a full established board, because you have to, this deck does not have room to play hand traps. Your opponent is gonna make their full board against you every single time you play Terrorist. And then, you only have 3 live cards versus their entire board. Like, that's not a good time. But, yeah, this... I don't know. People are gonna play this. You're gonna get sacked by this. It's gonna feel bad. At the end of the day, this just keeps getting hit every ban list. Maybe... I don't know how they're gonna hit this deck anymore without hitting Kinkellos, but... yeah, it's just don't lose the coin flip against 60-card Terrorist, okay? Forehead. Yeah, then we have, Sprite. Tri-Brigade Sprite, this is one of the more underrated decks. I actually think I'm putting this higher than what a lot of people might suspect, but yeah, I guarantee you, there's probably going to be a Tri-Brigade Sprite in top 100 of this Duelist Cup. There always is a Tri-Brigade Sprite in top 100 of the Duelist Cup. And I feel like it's like maybe the same couple people that keep doing this. But this is a deck that runs tons of hand traps. It's plays very well through hand traps. That's like a big advantage of it, besides Maxi. But Phalar, Infirm, Ash versus Sprite, traditionally not that effective. Even something like Droll, this deck can put up a board through it versus something like Gimmick Puppet, which Droll does stop the Gimmick Puppet FTK. But yeah, its deck is just solid, and it might. I don't know if this deck will play Azure Rune or will play the Silo Hat Rabbit. It's a generic link too that gets you an extra disruption, but I don't know if Tri-Brigade even needs it. I guess the other Sprite variants will. I think the non-Tri-Brigade Sprite variants will play Silo Hat Rabbit just as another disruption. But here's the thing: I'm actually gonna put this in Rogue. I think the pure Sprite variants, when I say quote unquote pure, in reality they were the shifter Sprite variants. And obviously when you're a shifter deck, and and shifter was a big perk of playing it, you lose some viability when shifter gets limited. So it is what it is. This deck has a much lower ceiling than Tri-Brigade Sprite, and yeah, I think if you're gonna play a Sprite variant, probably just play the Tri-Brigade Sprite variant. I think that's the best version now. Man, but speaking of shifter decks, man, this Flu sure is a thing. It's okay. It's okay. I'll say this. I don't know. This is like, it lost prosperity, so it lost consistency. It lost shifter, so it lost the win con. And it's not like Flu was doing that hot before. And yeah, we all know what it is. It's probably better than Cashtera right now. Like, would you believe me? I said like Flu is more consistent than Cashtera. It doesn't lose as hard to Max. It's like it's Flu. Do I really need to say more about this deck? Rescue Ace. So Rescue Ace. Again, I think Rescue Ace is a bit underrated. I think it's very good against every deck, with the exception of Tenpai. And that's obviously a major problem about Rescue Ace when your Tenpai matchup sucks. Because you have no in-engine back row disruption, so if they activate a Sangan, you're done. This is the only deck, I think, out of all the decks actually shown here, I think so far Tenpai is the only one that actually mains Board Breakers and mains Lightning Storm and Duster, and obviously those hurt way more against Rescue Ace. So unfortunately, your matchup against the most played deck is terrible, which is why you can't really deep that much higher. Even though I think this deck is actually very good against everything else. It's like pseudo Fire King, except arguably it didn't get hit by the mana list, unlike Fire King did. So yeah, the only reason is Tenpai, man. This is like one of those decks that just gets massively hurt because of Tenpai's existence. And then other Cybers decks. So Adagnister, I think Adagnister is actually underrated. There is a way to play Adagnister where you can make a Terahertz, although it requires you making deck building space. But obviously if you do that, then suddenly your Tenpai matchup would used to go from like being kind of poor to being auto win because you make an unaffected terahertz. So that's nice. Has slightly less room for non-engine than Mathmech. Gets hurt more by stuff like Droll. Although Mathmech can get hurt by Droll, I guess if you don't open with Circular, but Circular's at 3, so yeah. And then Salad is like the only other Cybers deck. I don't know. Salad is okay. I don't know if Salad is that much better than Mariz. I don't know if it justifies an entire tier difference, to be honest. But yeah, Salad can play through hand traps. It actually surprisingly does not have that much room for hand traps itself. But if you end on double trap, like if you end on a counter trap plus rage for 4, I mean most decks aren't gonna play through that, so that's pretty decent, including Tenpai. And you know, you don't care about board breakers actually on your board as much as other decks because you have you don't care about your Salad grade like Raging Phoenix getting hit by like a board breaker. Like they're gonna droplet my vanilla monster, you're gonna Raigeki my monster when I have a Phalanx engrave. Like yeah, cool. And I guess Duster can hurt, but you do always search the counter trap, so you can negate the Duster, and then Rage is still hard to play through. So it's just I don't really see this deck odds often anymore. So like this could be a lot worse than it is, and just people have realized that and they stop playing it. But yeah, and then Centurion, I will say Centurion. I said it's like one of the most overrated decks before. I'll continue saying that. Like it feels so mid. Like we don't have the other Centurion support. We don't have Atri or Premier and Primus, so it just feels kind of like it doesn't have a great Tenpai matchup. It gets hurt way too much by hand traps in my opinion. Like yeah, this deck can play hand traps itself, but also this deck can't play through a stiff breeze. It actually can't play through even like a moderately non-stiff breeze. Like Imperm on the Auxilia sometimes puts you on nothing, and that's like you're never playing through 2 hand traps with Centurion, which a lot of decks tend to do. It sees a lot of play. It's popular. I just maybe if it got its support, definitely. I actually am not sure if actually playing Centurion with Whitewoods actually improves the Centurion deck, but there's a possibility. It's like I've been jamming Centurion in any deck that's not pure Centurion, just because I can't stand the gameplay loop of like normal summon like Primera or like Trudea get hit by 1 hand trap, or like I hand trap my opponent like 2 to 3 times, they end on an SP, and then I can't play through the damn SP. Like we'll see if I eat my words on this, but I feel comfortable not like having Centurion in the middle of tier 3 for now. Paleo, Joshua Schmidt. That's all. Pearly. Okay, so Pearly. I think Pearly is also one of the more underrated decks. Nobody plays Pearly. Like it constantly has very high win rates in terms of stats. It has a game plan which I think is very strong in that draw 4 to 6 cards, end on a towers, draw into Maxi, activate Maxi on your opponent's turn. Good luck. It doesn't have a bad Tenpai matchup at all. In fact, if you make Extra Noir plus Fucho plus Maxi drawing 4 to 6 cards in your semi-phase, what the hell is Tenpai gonna do to you? Absolutely nothing. And yeah, this deck has tons of room for non-engine. It's relatively, it can be, sometimes it gets hurt by hand traps if you don't open straight, but you have so many copies of straight. It's like, yeah, I don't know. I think this deck is way better than its representation suggests, but because nobody's gonna play this, it's probably not gonna top 100 the Duelist Cup, so I'm gonna look like an idiot again, putting Pearly so high. I've dropped it since tier 2 just because if nobody's playing it, like I can't put a deck that has no results, even if it's because nobody's playing it. But I guess going second is a bit harder, but I mean this deck isn't the worst at going second. There are certainly decks up here that are slightly worse at going second and can't play as much non-engine. But yeah, Pearly, Mikanko, as you guys, as I've mentioned before, I don't think going second Mikanko is viable in Master Duel. It's simply not even one of the best going second decks. Like, obviously, it's not the best going second deck, but I basically treat Makako as a 60 card warrior Infernoble pile. So, in that sense, I think it's worse than just pure Infernoble, but it's worse than the I guess it's worse than the super heavy Samurai Infernoble list that top 10 rated. But it is a wombo combo deck that makes Isolde, so it can't be too bad, but also it's the worst version of that, so that's why it's down here in Rogue, I suppose. Sky Striker. Oh my god, I love Ray. Ray does not love Tenpai. That's all I'll say. I don't know, man. This is if your Tenpai matchup is rough, like you better have an amazing matchup versus everything else. And I don't think Ray has an amazing matchup against everything else. Especially now, apparently people are playing Secret Village now. That's even worse for Sky Striker. No, I'll put it above. I'll put it above these two. Like I cannot respect Cashier as a deck anymore. It's just, man. I guess that says more about Cash than Striker. But Striker, we'll put it here. Plants. Plants is just. I think Plants and Isolde will forever be beside each other on my ban list in the future, just because they're like the exact same style of deck. It's like go first, pseudo FTK your opponent, and play through a disruption. Everyone knows the choke points. Everyone knows the problematic cards. Doesn't matter. You're probably still gonna get combo through it, especially if you don't open hand traps. So, yeah. And Sword Soul. This deck, man, this deck. Protoss Call Fire, I suppose that's something. I don't know. Do you even win against Tenpai if you Protoss Call Fire? What if they just go Seals Pass? Because I've never gotten into that game state with Sword Soul. I don't think Sword Soul is something you should seriously consider riding stage 2 with. It's not until we get the new support. So yeah, this is what I think the general meta looks like now for Master Duel. Now that I'm looking at it, it looks a bit weird. There's some weird deck placements, but again, we'll see after this Duelist Cup. And of course, let me know if there's a deck that I missed or the deck that I didn't mention that you want me to talk about, because I've honestly cut down a lot of decks from my last tier list. One, because I realized that video was way too damn long, and two, I wanted to include like all the new banlist cards, like all the unbanned cards and all the new decks. In order to do that, I've cut down on some of the, I guess, the lower roguish level decks and like the below rogue level decks. I thought, but yeah, obviously, yeah. Tell me if you agree with this as well, and come back to this video 2 weeks in the future after Duelist Cup to tell me how wrong I was on this meta once again. But yeah, thank you for watching.